Welcome back. Let's talk about agriculture in Oregon and specifically how farm workers are paid. Starting this month, the state's agriculture overtime law took effect. It's a 5-year process, and in this first year, the overtime threshold is 55 hours per week. Anything above 55 hours must be paid time and a half. Here's how that threshold changes over time. 55 hours this year and next, then it goes down to 48 hours in 2025 and 26, and then down to the usual 40 hours in 2027. Now, this affects all 85,000 plus farm workers in the state of Oregon, and overtime pay is something they've not been legally entitled to for more than 80 years. And on the surface, you may be thinking, well, this sounds like a great idea. These workers will finally be getting paid the way they should be. And that's how many Democratic lawmakers saw it as well last year, including the chief sponsor of the bill, Andrea Salinas.
I don't blame anybody today for setting that system up, but I do take responsibility for changing a system that was rooted in racism.
Detractors of the bill, like the Oregon Farm Bureau, for example, argued it's not going to do what they wanted, that it would decimate the state's fruit, vegetable, and dairy industry, and that farmers would reduce worker hours and look to machines to do the work in order to avoid paying that overtime and employ fewer workers. Now, look, we're only 9 days into the new year, so we can't really measure the success or failure of the law just yet in Oregon, but our neighbors to the north and south, California and Washington, if you're geographically impaired like I am, those neighbors are a bit farther along in the process. And a recent article from the Sacramento Bee talks about just how that law is working in the Golden State, or not so much. It's an article that we think is worth your time. The headline reads, "Overtime law was supposed to help these California workers. Many make less money now." Pretty self-explanatory, but let's take a deeper look. California's overtime law began in 2016, and as of this month, smaller farms have to pay overtime for anything more than 50 hours a week, while larger farms, those with at least 26 employees, are already down to 40 hours a week. The Sacramento Bee reports that farm workers are telling them that since the new law took effect, they're largely not getting paid overtime because their hours are being cut to avoid it. And that means their take-home pay is suffering as well. One worker says over the past 2 years, his take-home pay dropped from $1,000 a week down to $600, and that it's because his hours were slashed from 60 down to 40. The president of the California Fresh Fruit Association, which was against the bill in the first place there in California, says the law has been frustrating for employers as well. He says it's prompted growers to cut hours, reduce the acreage they farm, hire more workers to work shorter weeks to avoid that OT, as well as turning to machines for less labor. And while all of that sounds bad for farm workers, the United Farm Workers Union, who obviously backed the law, says that is the point. They say these growing pains are part of the movement towards a more just agricultural economy. The group's communications director said the amount of workers that are getting their hours cut, well, that speaks to the reality that there was a ton of unpaid overtime being worked. He went on to say that farm workers often live right at the poverty line and, quote, any attempt to change that is shaking the very foundations of the industry. And it seems their argument is that change is hard, but that this change is worth the tough times because it's pushing things in the right direction for the future. So, are tougher times on the horizon here in Oregon now that we're in the first stage of this farm overtime bill? Possibly. We'll have to wait and see. But will it be worth it for the future? That's going to be up for you to decide. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. You could email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090.